As in previous lectures, today again we will be discussing non-traditional sources of threat to human life, to global order, to international society. In the previous class, we had studied about climate change, which is posing a threat to human life. Today, we will be discussing some more threats and how they are impacting human life. There are many non-traditional issues on the security agenda, and these can be grouped together under the heading of human security, which means the well-being of human beings, and human health is one of them. Human health, and as we can see today, the control of epidemic diseases is very important for human security. Although there are certain other issues also, like poverty, which play a closely connected role, because pandemic and epidemics rise more quickly, expand more quickly, take the population in the grip if there is poverty, if there is less development. Human health in less developed countries is a matter of grave concern than it is in developed countries. In fact, human health has long been an issue of international concern. In the past 1 year, we have been discussing how several threats have been posed to human health. 100 years back, we had a Spanish flu, and today we have COVID-19 virus. Human health and the challenge to it is closely related to climate change. पर्यावरण में जो बदलाव हो रहे हैं वो मनुष्य के स्वास्थ्य को प्रभावित कर रहे हैं. And we can see that trade and early forms of globalization have played a major role in spreading contagions around the world. If we talk of the past, then we can see that from bubonic plague to smallpox to avian flu, globalization has carried pathogens and parasites to new parts of the world. As regards coronavirus, we know that how it spreads. And in the initial stage, when people traveled without any restriction, they carried this virus along with them and spread it in the whole world. So while globalization has brought the world together, has been a reason, a cause, a factor of many positive changes, it has caused this kind of havoc, this kind of trouble for human health also. Then again, we can see how climate change is closely related to human health. And thanks to shift in rainfalls, and temperature, regions which were once free of mosquitoes, ticks, and other parasites are now their feeding grounds and are threatening human life and also challenging states' capacity to deal with that health crisis. Today's scenario is an example of this. How states are failing to cope with the stress caused by this health crisis, which is posed to almost all the countries of the world. In fact, with disease comes increased strain on states' healthcare and emergency response system. And this can stretch state resources to their breaking point too. As we are witnessing this even in our own country. In the past too, in 2014, Ebola outbreak had impacted mostly sub-Saharan and African countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, etc. In extreme cases, a state can itself begin to lose grip on its own political and economic system, upon its territory and its population. The situation today in India is so much explosive that Supreme Court and High Courts are intervening and asking the executive to do the needful. In fact, a country like China, which is supposed to be the origin of coronavirus, has offered help to India in combating this crisis, this second wave of corona crisis, which is a matter of concern. And the government must introspect. So we can see that health security is equally important when compared to other security threats. Here, weapons are not being used, but the economic and political conditions of other countries are being impacted. A number of studies have shown correlation between the incidence of disease and state failure. And given the additional connection between climate change and disease migration, such correlations, in fact, bolster the case for a new security agenda that takes both health and climate into account jointly. If we talk of the past, leaving the present behind, then we see that one disease which has till now been the subject of a lot of debate and intense research has been HIV/AIDS. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it has been observed, it has been studied that it has achieved terrible proportions. In fact, studies show that this area holds just over 11% of the world's population, but almost 70% of HIV/AIDS cases are there. And in only 1 year, that is in 2009, 1.8 million people died of HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan region of Africa. Reasons of this range from individual to community level reasons, like poverty, colonialism, even failure or refusal of Western companies to supply the needed drugs at affordable prices, something which we are witnessing even today. The same is happening with COVID-19, which has in fact impacted most of the developed world, in contrast to HIV/AIDS, which had impacted mostly the developing countries. We can see that states are more likely to be unstable and less likely to function so long as these diseases continue to ravage their population and undermine the political and economic stability of the state. इस बात को आप बखूबी समझ सकते हैं आज के सिनेरियो में, जहां डिजीज की वजह से पॉलिटिकल एंड इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी देशों की क्वेश्चन में आ जा रही है, उन पे प्रश्न चिन्ह लग जा रहा है. ग्लोबलाइजेशन की वजह से अधिक लोग एक स्थान से दूसरे स्थान पर जा रहे हैं और इस प्रकार से वो अपने साथ वायरस को ले जा रहे हैं. तो ग्लोबलाइजेशन और क्लाइमेट चेंज, इन दोनों ने जहां मानव विकास का काम किया है, वहां ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी को भी चुनौती प्रदान की है. और कुछ समय पहले तक इस प्रकार की बातें कही जा रही थी कि इसकी वजह से कहीं कोई दोबारा पेंडेमिक स्पेनिश फ्लू की तरह ना फैल जाए. लेकिन फिर दूसरी ओर ये भी देखा गया कि टेक्नोलॉजी का एडवांसमेंट हो चुका है, विकास हुआ है, और इसलिए ऐसी पेंडेमिक की कल्पना लोगों ने नहीं की थी और ऐसा लग रहा था कि तकनीकी के विकास के साथ इस प्रकार की पेंडेमिक जैसी स्पेनिश फ्लू जैसी वो अब दोबारा नहीं फैलेगी. लेकिन we can see that this proved wrong, and human security and health has been a matter of grave concern for the past 1.5 years. A lot is to be done regarding this. All the countries of the world have to think about this. It needs international cooperation to address the challenge of climate change and the challenge of human security. One state alone cannot answer this challenge. States have to cooperate, they have to get connected. And here we see international politics in the working. In fact, we need more and more international forums to look into this grave issue of human security. One more related issue to human security beside health is resources. Why people migrate? Why globalization took place? Of course, the reason being economic. The notion that demand for natural resources will lead to scarcity is an old one and was given by, as you must be knowing, English political economist Thomas Malthus, who wrote an essay on the principle of population, and it was published in 1798, in which he gives his hypothesis that human numbers tend to increase in a geometrical rate, whereas resources increase in arithmetical sense, which means population will increase more than the resources on which they depend. As such, what will happen? It will lead to profound human and economic crisis when the number of people will surpass the supplies. Malthus's ideas have been challenged in the centuries since he wrote this article. And it has been claimed that advances in technology, improvement in productivity, and the opening of new agricultural lands have in fact increased resources available to us and allowed us to make better use of these resources. However, over the past 20 years, we can see that the concerns shown by Malthus have been again taken up by concerned writers, and they have used this theory to further the cause of human development, and what they see as an approaching resource crisis. Malthusian theory expresses itself in international relations through studies of resource scarcity. And we see that some of these studies revolve around dangers posed by the rising population of the world and the dangers posed by this rising population to subsistence agriculture. And it has been claimed that this rising population will lead to resource exhaustion and also soil erosion. Then there are some other thinkers who look at this unequal distribution of power and wealth, and they believe that it can lead to hunger because food would be there, but it would not be available to people because of unequal distribution of power and wealth. Here we are talking of Amartya Sen, who has claimed that famines occur not due to natural reasons, but due to man-made reasons, because people do not have resources, they do not have access to food, although there is no scarcity of food. तो ये एक बहुत गंभीर बात है जो माल्थस ने 18वीं शताब्दी में कही, और आज हम उसको सामने अपने पाते हैं कि पॉपुलेशन जो लगातार बढ़ रही है वो रिसोर्सेस पर एक बोझ उत्पन्न कर रही है। भारत और चीन जो दो सबसे बड़े जनसांख्यिकीय दृष्टि से देश हैं, उन पर अगर आप दृष्टि डालें तो यहाँ सबसे ज्यादा गरीबी भी है। और अभी जो स्थिति है उसको देखते हुए तो ऐसा लगता है कि प्रकृति ने, या मैन मेड अगर ये क्राइसिस है, तो पॉपुलेशन को कम करने का निर्णय ले लिया है। आज जो स्थिति है उसमें तो सर्वाइवल ऑफ द फिटेस्ट काम कर रहा है। कल्याणकारी राज्य का जो कंसेप्ट था वो आज विलुप्त हो गया है। पॉपुलेशन अगर इस तरीके से कम हो जाती है, रिसोर्सेस पर क्रंच कम हो जाएगा और आगे आने वाले 10 वर्षों में डेवलपमेंट थोड़ा आसान हो जाएगा। Is there a hidden agenda behind this COVID-19 disease? I don't know. This is just conjecturing. However, we see that population has posed a serious problem to resources, availability of resources, and its availability to all. That is very much important. How many people are having access to resources? जिनके पास साधन नहीं है उनको अन्न तो छोड़ दीजिए, आज ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रही है और दवा भी नहीं मिल रही है। तो वो रिसोर्सेज जिन पर हम अपना हक समझते थे, ऑक्सीजन पे, हवा पे, प्राणवायु पर, उसको लेकर भी क्राइसिस है, उसकी भी कमी है। Isn't it a serious problem? Shouldn't we think more about it? आप लोग जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनको इस पर विचार करना चाहिए कि what is happening and why it is happening. What तो दिख रहा है, पर why इसका जवाब हमको ढूंढने की जरूरत है। Now one more aspect is attached when we talk of resources with reference to human security. While on the one hand you saw that rising population will pose a threat to resources and there will be a crunch of resources. On the other hand, we have resource curse. What does it mean, resource curse? There is examples of this. In the 17th, 18th century, we saw imperialism and colonialism reaching Asia and Africa. Why? Why did British or Portuguese or Dutch East India companies came to India? For India's natural resources. India was called Sone ki Chidiya. The same was true of many of the African countries which had oil, uranium, or even diamond. But they were not able to use these resources on their own because they did not have that technology. As a result, they were made colonies, they were colonized, and their resources were extracted and drained away by a number of Western colonial powers. And so the resources which are supposed to bring wealth and well-being to a state, in fact proved a curse to them, because due to these resources, Western powers colonized them. So this is called resource curse, and it was one of the reason why Asian and African countries were colonized and exploited by the Western powers. As you know, that this colonialism and this exploitation, extraction of resources, what does it do? This undermines the population's socioeconomic development. It corrupts the political process and causes domestic conflicts over the distribution of resource wealth. In many African countries, this happened. Even in modern times, resources have played a negative role also. If there are vested interests, if there are corrupt governments, then these resources may be used not for the welfare of the people, for the welfare of the very people who are the actual owners of these resources, natural resources, forests, mines, but they may be used for multinational and transnational corporations. And this has led to many movements, many revolts, many rebellions in developing countries. Even in India, we have originally we had Naxal movement due to this reason, especially in Odisha, Jharkhand, which are resource-rich states. So, resource scarcity is another non-traditional source of potential insecurity, as is the resource curse, which often undermines the governance capacity of states. With significant deposits of easily accessible natural resources, such as oil and gas, or when we talk of Africa, uranium and diamond. For a number of years, Western powers were not ready to decolonize Africa because they had their interest there in the form of extracting uranium from there. These countries had uranium reserves, and uranium was an important element in the raging Cold War because it was a material required for nuclear weapons. And Western powers did not want to leave Africa and let USSR and its supporting countries to reach there to fill that vacuum and to extract that uranium. So to hold control over uranium, they kept these countries colonized. And we can see that after the collapse of communism, after the end of Cold War, a number of these countries were decolonized. Angola and Namibia are two examples. So we saw that human security challenge includes health, resource crunch and resource curse. And a very important aspect of human security, non-traditional security threats, is energy security. We all know that oil and gas are two pillars of the industrialization and development of a country. And here comes energy threat to the global society today. In fact, a lot has been written and said about this threat. And we can see that resource scarcity and the resource curse gives rise to a much wider question about energy security. In fact, energy has posed a problem for international relations since the West became dependent on imported oil around the beginning of the 20th century. As American writer David Painter writes, that 2 decades of access to cheap oil in the 1950s and 1960s were followed by the production embargo imposed by the OPEC organization of in the 1970s. And this led to price rise. Oil prices rose, and this played a very crucial role in the conduct of the Cold War. In fact, it is said that there is a theory which is not very much discussed, which is that the end of the Cold War focuses on the impact of falling oil prices in the 1980s. What does this mean? The falling oil prices in 1980s impacted USSR in a negative way. USSR, which is exporter of oil and gas, felt the squeeze because it depended for foreign currency on the export of oil and gas. But as the prices of oil fell in 1980s, USSR felt financial loss and was driven to the brink of bankruptcy and finally political collapse. In post-Cold War era, we have very much in the beginning of that period, America invading Iraq. And when we talk of Iran, when we talk of Gulf crisis, we study that a number of reasons were there which led America towards Iraq. And one of these reasons was America's desire to have control over the oil supply to the world. You know that in post-Cold War era, globalization had also begun. And a number of Asian countries, especially China and India, were surging ahead. And it was being said that these two countries may become major world powers. America very soon realized that if it has control over oil supply to the other countries of the world, which included China and India, then it may have some control over the growth rate of these two countries, including and other countries also. And so we see that America's invasion of Iraq had several reasons behind it, and one of them being America's desire to have control over oil and through oil over the development of other countries, especially Asian countries who were supposed to become developed in the next 10, 20 years. Now let us look at this energy security more closely, and why is it so important today? There are several reasons for it. And one of these has to do with Russia, which remains dependent on energy sales for its foreign currency reserves. Under President Putin, Russia has effectively manipulated its control over the Russian oil and gas industry as a foreign policy tool in its relations with Ukraine and Europe. This approach is called energy diplomacy. You must remember that oil diplomacy has been used in the world since long. हम लोगों ने पहले भी बात की थी कि कैसे भारत ने इजराइल को मान्यता नहीं दी, क्योंकि अरब देशों के साथ वो मित्रता रखना चाहता था, और अरब देशों से मित्रता का एक रीजन ये भी था कि भारत को इन देशों से ऑयल प्राप्त होता था. सऊदी अरब जो विश्व के लगभग 25% ऑयल रिजर्व्स को कंट्रोल करता है, so India wanted to have good relations with Saudi Arab and other Arab League countries. अन्य कारण तो थे ही. So now what we see that Russia has been using oil diplomacy with reference to Ukraine and Europe. Russia's oil diplomacy has raised the profile of energy security, particularly in the wake of ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis. As you know that Russia has been deploying troops near Ukraine, although in a recent development, it has called back troops from near Ukraine. Then a second factor to explain the securitization of energy is the rise of China and the impact of its ascent on oil prices. How can we explain this? For the past decade, China has had an almost endless appetite for oil. And this has pushed global oil prices higher and higher. However, a few years back, there was a slowdown in China's economy, and this has led to global oil price slump, creating several fiscal issues for countries which have been exporting oil exporting countries. Finally, we see that energy security cannot be separated from socio-economic development. Here, we see that the critics in international relations point out that development depends on a steady access to energy, to oil, because it is oil which runs the cars, which runs the ACs, which runs the computers, which runs the industries. So we find that energy scarcity will disadvantage the poor long before it will affect the wealthy. And if there is energy crisis, if there is threat to access to oil and energy, what will happen? It will obstruct less economically development countries attempts to improve their position, to improve their socio-economic conditions, and it will reinforce the gap between haves and have-nots. So access to oil is extremely important. लगभग सभी देश आज इस परेशानी से जूझ रहे हैं. अगर ऑयल नहीं होगा तो उनका विकास नहीं होगा. और ये क्राइसिस जो कम विकसित देश हैं, अल्प विकसित देश हैं, उनके सामने अधिक है बनिस्बत के जो वेल्दी स्टेट्स हैं. अब अगर हम वेल्दी स्टेट्स की ओर नजर डालें तो व्हाट वी सी दैट आफ्टर 9/11 अमेरिका रियलाइज्ड that it was too much dependent on Middle East for supply of oil. So what did it do? अमेरिका ने टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से ऑयल और गैस का एक्सट्रैक्शन शुरू किया, हाइड्रोलिक टेक्नोलॉजी का प्रयोग करके. नतीजा क्या हुआ कि फ्रॉम बीइंग इंपोर्ट ड्रिवन इन द फील्ड ऑफ ऑयल, अमेरिका became it became in fact an export capable country. यानी जहां अभी तक वो ऑयल को इंपोर्ट कर रहा था, वहीं अब ये स्थिति आ गई कि इट वाज एबल to export oil to other countries. So उसका जो ताकत थी वो बढ़ गई. It became a potential oil exporter instead of being an importer. So this changed America's position in the world. और इसने अमेरिका की ताकत को भी बढ़ा दिया. Whereas we see that the issue of energy security has baffled and haunted many developing countries, India being one of them. And we see that India has signed civil nuclear deal with a number of countries, including the US. तो आज एनर्जी की क्राइसिस ने राज्यों के सामने एक सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट को प्रस्तुत किया. ये सब ऐसे थ्रेट्स है जो विच आर वेरी अनकॉमन, जो अपारंपरिक हैं, जिनके बारे में आज से शायद 35 साल पहले ज्यादा सोचा भी नहीं जाता था. एनर्जी एक इशू तो जरूर था, लेकिन it was not a challenge to countries. It was a more simple word. लेकिन in the past 35 years we can see that we have been having some serious threats which are disguised, which are not evident, and they are posing serious threat to human security. Beside this, we have another issue of demographics. Because of all these challenges, climate challenge, security threat, pandemic, health issues, resource crunch and resource curse, and also energy crisis, people have been moving, they have been migrating, and this has played a very important role in international politics for the past about 20 years. Terrorism has also played a role in it. आतंकवाद ने भी पॉपुलेशन को मूव करने के लिए मजबूर किया है. Natural calamities, war, all these have forced people to migrate. जब युद्ध होता है, या आतंकवादी घटनाएं होती हैं तो उसका प्रभाव ह्यूमन बीइंग्स पर पड़ता है, विशेष रूप से महिलाओं और बच्चों पर पड़ता है, और इट फोर्सेस देम टू माइग्रेट, टू लीव देयर ट्रेडिशनल हैबिटेट, और दूसरे जगहों पर जाने के लिए वो मजबूर हो जाते हैं. And this has also been posing a threat to states. माइग्रेशन की वजह से नई प्रकार की चुनौतियां, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक, कल्चरल चैलेंजेस आर बीइंग फेस्ड बाय कंट्रीज. भारत का ही अगर उदाहरण ले लें तो भारत में 1970 से जिस तरीके से माइग्रेशन हुआ है, बांग्लादेश, जो आज बांग्लादेश है, तब पूर्वी पाकिस्तान था, या म्यांमार से, या इवन श्रीलंका, वैसे हम श्रीलंका से माइग्रेशन तो नहीं कहेंगे, वो एक नागरिकता का प्रश्न था, लेकिन बांग्लादेश और म्यांमार, यहाँ से विशेष रूप से जो माइग्रेशन हुआ, ईस्ट पाकिस्तान से जो हुआ था, उसने भारत के लिए आंतरिक समस्याएं भी उत्पन्न की. असम से लेकर बाकी जो पूर्वोत्तर के राज्य हैं, उनके सामने अपने जो ओरिजिनल उनका जो रूप था, उनके सामने जो एक एथनिक समस्या थी वो उत्पन्न हो गई. So we see that migration can raise all sorts of international issues, because we see that the world has never seen so many people on the move. Even in recent years, we have seen that how people from Central Asian countries or Middle East Asian countries are migrating to Europe. West Asia has also seen people migrating from here to European countries, which has led to many of these countries closing their borders to these migrants, illegal immigrants. In fact, America had also closed its doors to migrants during the tenure of Donald Trump as president. We all know how wall between America and Mexico was being discussed by Donald Trump. So these are all non-traditional security threats, and these need more exploration. We need to know more about these, and it will be good if, being students of international politics, you think about it, research about it, and write your paper about it.